brings us to the next section. Starting over in our numbers, number 1, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim, H-A-K-I-P-P-U-R-I-M. Yom meaning day, Kippurim meaning covering, canceling, reconciling, or pardon is what Kippur means, or atonement. The second name for this day is Yom HaPodeth, or the Day of Redemption. It's also referred to as the Day of Redemption. So Yom Kippur was known in the calendar as the day of national cleansing. It was part of, and that it was that fourth and final section of that season of Teshuvah. Remember, it is the last call for repentance. It comes on the 10th of Tishrei of the 7th month. We know 7 is the number of completion or perfection. And remember 10 is that number of testing, law and order, government, accountability. So this day is very serious. All 7 of the high holy days on here, those little dots, all 7 of those are Sabbaths, extra to the weekly Sabbaths. And this day, the Day of Atonement, is the most sacred of all of those. There was absolutely no servile work, period. We already read that. Remember last week in Leviticus, there was 4 warnings in succession, just in one place. Yeah. Do not work. This is the only biblically mandated fast. You are supposed to fast to observe this day. Now you can fast at any time, for any reason, but this is the only across the board, God came down, mandated, on the calendar, you can just count on that, God tells you to fast. It's the only one like that, period. So, because there was only one of these, Yom Kippur is also referred to as the fast in the Bible, or the day of the fast, or the great fast. When you see those idioms, it is referring to Yom Kippur. We need to know these idioms of what kind of the shorthand of the day. That makes it a lot easier when we're dissecting prophecy. So there was a severe consequence if you ate or if you worked. Yes. You were cut off. In other vernacular, that means you're damned. There's no hope. God had held this day deadly, deadly serious. Now, the sacrificial protocol, you could have sermon series upon the beautiful parallels, these intricate, multi-layered foreshadowings held in the sacrificial system. But we're not going to go into that level of detail today, but I do want to make sure we have a working knowledge as a foundation for our study so we can understand what was going on this day. Amen. The high priest alone worked on this day. No one else could help him. Not only that, but no one else could even be with him on this particular day. He had to have with him a golden censer. When the high priest entered the veil, he would go into the Holy of Holies this day of the year. He had to take the censer and a handful of incense. And once inside, he would burn the incense in the censer. God's form of the shadow is the prayers of the believers. You get that from Revelation 8:3 and from Psalm 141:2. Then there was actual 2 washings, which is unusual. 2 washings, twice. Once before entering the sanctuary, and then once before entering the holy place. You have to wash yourselves with the word. That's the form of that shadow. Linen garments that he wore this day. We're just going over what the high priest had to do. On this day, Aaron did not wear his normal priestly robes. Those robes are described in Exodus 28 as garments for glory and beauty. Remember those? He laid those aside on this day and wore white linen, plain white linen garments called holy garments. The form of this shadow, Messiah laid aside the glory that he had above and humbly clothed himself in sinless humanity. So, there was a threefold, the priest, that was what the priest did for himself. Now the work he had to do was a threefold work of atonement. He had to return, number 1, for himself and his household. He would offer a bullock. Then he would take, after that, offer for himself, then he would take 2 goats, drawn by lot, one for the Lord, which would be sacrificed later, and the other a scapegoat to be taken out to the wilderness. Well, he didn't do anything then, he just did it, and then took the blood from the bullock that he had sacrificed for himself, and entered the Holy of Holies, sprinkling the blood on the mercy seat. Then, the second thing that had to be atoned for was the nation. Nation. Key words. He had sacrificed the Lord's goat that had been drawn by lot previously, and then go into the veil again with the censer and the whole 9 yards and sprinkle that blood upon the mercy seat. And then the last thing that had to be atoned for was the actual physical sanctuary itself and its furnishings, again, with the sprinkling of blood. And then after that ceremony in the temple, they would take the live goat and symbolically confess the sins of the evils of Israel, and it would be taken out into the wilderness into a land of separation. This entrance into the veil, obvious representation of our separation between God and man that can only be breached by atonement. In Exodus 33:20, the Lord warns that no man can see his face and live. But on this day, the priest could be in God's presence. And so, for this reason, Yom Kippur is also referred to, another name it is referred to is face to face, meaning face to face. This is the idiom that is most notably in 1 Corinthians 13:12, we see through that glass darkly, but then face to face. That you see through glass darkly is actually a quote from the Midrash, which is a non-law rabbinical writings. So, it's all there. So in conclusion, on Passover, blood was sprinkled on the door of the house, your personal door. Yes. Then Pentecost, blood was sprinkled on the people in the Book of the Covenant, the nation. Yes. Then in Tabernacles, blood was sprinkled on the mercy seat before the Father. So this was the day, once a year, one man approached the Holy of Holies, taking the blood of a sacrifice that had already been slain, and sprinkling it on the mercy seat. So Isaiah 52:14 and 15 makes a little bit more sense. It says, as many as were astonished at thee, his visage was so marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. Well, we know what that means. But the next part, so shall he sprinkle many nations.
Hallelujah.
Okay, it all fits together. It really does all fit together. All right, it kills me to not go into more into that, but I just needed to provide a working knowledge to remind us of what happens on that day. There's some beautiful stuff there. It just kills me to not delve into it. We just absolutely cannot this morning. All right, number 2, Yom Kippur, as it relates to the great shofar. All right, remember there are 3 shofars in the Jewish year, each indicating a specific day. The first trump was blown at Shavuot, it's a picture of the betrothal. The last trump was blown at Pentecost. Then the last trump was blown at Yom Torah, the Feast of Trumpets, which what we did last week. The bridegroom comes. And then the great trump is blown on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, to herald the wedded and crowned Messiah to birth. So this is when Israel is expecting Messiah, the David, to come, which is right, actually, because that's exactly what they're going to get. That's exactly what they're going to get. Okay, so keep in mind that both Yom Torah and Yom Kippur are both part of tabernacles. I can't stress that enough. Both part of tabernacles. One collective feast, 3 individual parts, 2 shofars. Alright, so let's look now at the great shofar. Let's go to Matthew 24, verse 29. Matthew 24, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the earth of the heavens shall be shaken. Okay, we can tell from the context here, this is Yom Kippur. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of the trumpet, meaning, translated from Hebrew, the great shofar. With the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven unto the other. Okay, so a great shofar is blown at the second coming, at the feast of, or the Day of Atonement. The great shofar results in what it says here, the gathering of the elect. All right, let's move on to Isaiah 27. Isaiah 27, verse 12. No, yeah, Isaiah 27. Yes, verse 12. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall beat off from the channel of the river unto the stream of Egypt, and ye shall be gathered one by one, O ye children of Israel. Well, we can tell that is from the battle of Armageddon. And it shall come to pass in that day that the great trumpet shall be blown, and they shall come which were ready to perish in the land of Assyria, and the outcasts in the land of Egypt, and shall worship the Lord in the holy mount of Jerusalem. So, the great shofar here is blown again at Yom Kippur, on the day of Armageddon. The great shofar resulting in an ingathering of the outcasts of Israel. Okay, so both of these scriptures, both Old and New, are in agreement that the context of the great shofar is not the return of the bridegroom. There isn't a shout of the archangel. The bridegroom has been crowned King of Kings in heaven. He's not returning this time in this context as a husband or a lover. He's, as he did in Yom Kippur, the Feast of Trumpets. He's returning to earth a conquering king.
Amen.
Okay, Armageddon is the context of this great shofar. So Armageddon is Yom Kippur, is the great shofar, same thing. All right, we haven't seen that. So the shofar is blown again, same as the first time in the Feast of Trumpets. The shofar is blown with the same result, a gathering together of the Lord's people. All survivors are gathering together of the people. That is what it says, a gathering together. So this great shofar is essentially a post, if you want to put it in our most used vernacular, is a post-tribulation rapture. A second rapture, a second reaping, if you will. Is that principle supported anywhere else in the Word? Is that principle of the Lord providing a do-over, a second chance? Let me try that again. Is that supported anywhere else? This principle is already found in the spring feast. All right, now let's brush up on our Old Testament knowledge, the shadow to understand the form. There was a second Passover. There was a second Passover. It's referred to as Pesach Seni, literally, second Passover. Before we delve into that, let's go back to a little bit more context. Context matters. Leviticus 10, 1 through 5. Leviticus 10. This is very, very critical. Leviticus 10. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer and put fire therein, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out a fire from the Lord, and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said unto Aaron, This is it that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come and nigh me, and before all the people will I be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said unto them, Come near and carry your brethren from before the sanctuary out of the camp. So they went near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. Okay, turn the page back to the beginning of chapter 8. Just follow me. Beginning of chapter 8, verse 4. And Moses did as the Lord commanded. Verse 5, it ended with as the Lord commanded to be done. Verse 9, end of it, the Lord commanded Moses. As the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 13, at the end of it, as the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 17 at the end, as the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 21, as the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 29, as the Lord commanded Moses. All right. Verse 36, which the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. Chapter 9 now, we're catching up to where we were. Verse 5, and they brought which Moses commanded. Verse 6, but it finishes up that this was the thing that the Lord commanded. Okay, so he's good there. Verse 7, as at the end, as the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 10, as the Lord commanded Moses. Jump to chapter 10, verse 5, as Moses had said. Now, and it goes on there. Go on to verse 11. It continues with as the Lord had commanded Moses. I know you're thinking, how is this possibly related? Just follow me. Just remember that this could present a problem here, as Moses had said. This could present a problem here. All right, now we're getting, that's the context. Now turn to Numbers 9. All right. Numbers 9, verse 6. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day, on the day of Passover.
Yes.
That was the day of Passover. They're like, hey. And those men said to him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore, in the Old English, that means why. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer the offering of the Lord in his appointed season among the children of Israel. And Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you, or any of your posterity, so he's making this a big-time law,
Yes.
shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off. That's something they didn't even ask him about.
Right.
Yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord the 14th day of the second month. At the even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall eat none of it until the morning, nor break any bone of it, according to all the ordinances of the Passover. But the man that is clean, and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin. Okay, so there's the story. The Targum, which is an Aramaic paraphrase of the Hebrew, provides a little bit more information about this dead body. It adds that it was one who had died by them suddenly, whereby pollution was contracted. And in the law, number 6:9, that requires a 7-day cleansing. And the Targum adds that this was the 7th day of their defilement. Many Jewish writers estimate that the Nadab and Abihu thing that we just read, offering strange fire in Leviticus 10, had occurred just 1 week prior. And that these certain men that it refers to here in Numbers were probably, most likely, Mishael and Elzaphan from the story in Leviticus, the ones who had buried their cousins, Nadab and Abihu, at the command of Moses. Do we know that for certain? Not really. But is it quite possible Yes.
Amen.
And either way, this analogy is going to work.
Yes.
Okay. For argument's sake, I'm going with my opinion that it was.